I know I read it somewhere. I think it was in the New England Journal of Medicine I read. Yeah, it was the New England Journal of Medicine. They had, as of the end of February, not one kid under 15 got this coronavirus. Not one. Median age was 59. Those that are dying, I think the median age is close to 80. Now, it's interesting because H1N1, that impacted disproportionately children. The coronavirus is hitting older adults hardest. Kids are not being impacted by this. And that's the nature of these viruses, and you have to find the end of it. And look, he's very right to say that if you have a compromised immune system, if you have underlying medical conditions, you're the one you've got to protect yourself. No large crowds, no long trips. Above all, don't get on a cruise ship. I think that's a good recommendation for a while. Sorry if you're in the cruise ship industry. I don't want you to lose business. I don't. But obviously, there's a problem in those confined areas. If you're a person with an underlying condition, an older person with that condition, compromised immune system, you need to think twice about doing things the way you normally would. The doctor who actually treated the first U.S. case of corona said patients with mild symptoms recover at home. Guy's name is Dr. George Diaz, Section Chief, Infectious Diseases, Providence Regional Medical Center in Everett, Washington. Said, no, most folks are infected with the virus, have mild disease, won't need to even come to a hospital, will never have to be admitted. You know, now there's some questions about whether it's seasonal with the warmer weather coming. I've had both sides of that argued to me as I talk it over with medical professionals I know. But what we see also in China is the numbers of people getting this thing are now getting greatly reduced. And in spite of what they were saying at one point last week, the mortality rate's 3% or over 3%. Looks like that's, again, another media mob lie. 1% or less. And usually, again, it's people with compromised immune systems. And, I know there are jittery stock market reactions. That's the nature of the stock market, which I've never loved. It's also, but to use it to scare people. And you would think, listening to some of these people in the media, and I want everyone to be protected. I want a cure for cancer. I want a cure for everything. You think that Donald Trump, I guess at some point this will be coming. He got in a lab with Russians and Ukrainians and he made the virus. I'm waiting for that one. You may think that's far-fetched. Maybe it is. Wouldn't shock me, though.
I just don't think that Joe Biden can generate enthusiasm when you got 60 billionaires contributing to his campaign.
He was in Congress for years. He had one senator support him. Nobody likes him. Nobody wants to work with him. He got nothing done.
We cannot get reelected. We cannot win this reelection. We can only reelect Donald Trump.
The clock is ticking. T-minus 239 days until Election Day.
Yeah, we're coming to your city. Gonna play our guitars and sing you a country song.
From coast to coast. From border to border. From sea to shining sea. Sean Hannity is on.
All right, hour 2, Sean Hannity Show. Toll-free telephone numbers 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of this extravaganza. It's pretty amazing to me just how predictable the mob and the media is. So we now have identified 100 of these moments of quid pro quo Joe, just kind of right before our eyes, seemingly in a rapid state of decline, almost disintegration. I think you could argue. Just go back to this weekend. He misstates his own name and tells his supporters we can only reelect Donald Trump. On top of, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal by the thing. The thing. It's alarming. And by comparison, Bernie's a year older. Bernie doesn't show any of these issues. And, my argument is very, very simple. And it's not that complicated to understand. This is the toughest job in the world, being president of the United States of America. Now, if a candidate has the physical strength, the stamina, the focus, if you will, the mental toughness needed to do this job, that is part of, it's critical. It's part of the normal vetting process. And for everybody to be, we can't talk about it. All these issues that the media, they just want to ignore. It's like it's not happening. Just like him on tape. You're not getting the billion unless you fire the prosecutor investigating my zero experience son getting millions. You have 6 hours to do it, leveraging our tax dollars. So they want to ignore quid pro quo Joe, zero experience Hunter. They want to ignore what's going on cognitively here because he can't seemingly keep a thought together and just keeps messing up every time he pretty much opens his mouth. You ignore all of these things. They're not going to vet the Biden-Obama years on the bad Iran deal or the bad economy that they have, or frankly, the failure in their handling, I would argue, of H1N1 swine flu. And you'd think, well, did it ever happen in the past? Well, yeah, Ronald Reagan did not have a good first debate against Walter Mondale. And yeah, there was the media. They were out there predictably doing what they won't do to Joe Biden, and that was actually vetting Ronald Reagan and asking the tough questions. By the way, even Bernie Sanders' campaign now is asking about Biden's stamina. Wall Street Journal, the fitness issue, new question in the presidential race. This is in October before the 1984 election. Is the oldest U.S. president showing his age? Reagan debate performance invites open speculation on his ability to serve. Other people actually use the word senile. The New Republic, the president's denial syndrome. New York Times, age issue, a myth. Seattle Times, old Reagan dancing way to 74. And it goes on from there. Anyway, let's go back in time and listen to a little of it.
You already are the oldest president in history, and some of your staff say you were tired after your most recent encounter with Mr. Mondale. I recall yet that President Kennedy had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances?
Not at all, Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
Debate number 2, Walter Mondale broke out in laughter. It was over. That election was done. 49 states later, Ronald Reagan reelected president. We bring back our resident historian, if you will. It was the Reagan leg of the conservative movement, then bolstered by the contract with America, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. And I would argue now the next wave, if you will, is what's happening with President Trump. Mr. Speaker, I think you remember that moment pretty well.
Well, Calista and I did a movie called Ronald Reagan, Rendezvous with Destiny, and we have that scene, and you can see in Mondale, literally see in his eyes.
It was over.
That he knows the election's over.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very, it was like watching a guy recognize that the Grand Master had pulled it off, and that he had no future.
All right.
It's really amazing. But notice the difference. I mean, I sat last night and looked at like 20 of the Biden comments, and what hit me was it's not that Biden is strong. It's a commentary on how unimaginably weak the Democrats are, that he was the least weak. He wasn't strong at all, but he was less weak than some of his competitors. And if you think about it, that is an amazing reality. And I think it's true. I think that Biden is a huge gamble for the Democrats. They're all breathing a sigh of relief because they had convinced themselves that Sanders was just sort of going to collapse the whole party. But they shouldn't be taking much of a sigh of relief because Biden has a huge potential to just simply fall apart.
I don't know.
I would not be at all surprised if that's what happened.
I think it's actually happening before our eyes. It's getting worse. And now he's given 7-minute stump speeches because they're afraid to let him talk at this point. They're scared to death if they don't have him all programmed up or on a teleprompter. You may not remember this. We had 2 conversations about it. It was when you were Speaker of the House, and I remember I was interviewing you, and I asked you how you're doing, and at one point I said, you look really tired. And you said to me, there is a never-ending ache of tiredness in the middle of my brain all day, every day. That's how hard that job was to you. And you were, you're like the Energizer Bunny. And I asked you, after you had left the House, said, how you feel now? He said, a lot better. You told me it took like 2 years for it to go away. That's how demanding mentally and physically these jobs are.
Well, I think that's right. In my case, I'd also spent 16 years nonstop trying to create a majority. So the exhaustion was more than just a speakership. But one of the things I'm most struck with President Trump is that he loves the job. He bounces back every day. The news media lies about him, beats on him, does everything they can to discredit him and make his life miserable. And he just gets right back in the arena and refuses to give up and has probably as much energy as anyone I've ever seen him. It's amazing how capable he is of being out there, being in the game, and really trying every day to figure out how to achieve the goals that he thinks the American people hired him to achieve. So, you know, the difference, you saw this with Hillary. And I have to say in passing, by the way, that Chris and I...
By the way, I did not in any way mean what I said. You said that to me. It's because I knew you. We were friends. I knew how hard you worked. I knew you were sleeping 2 hours a night. But I knew what went into it. And I do remember the earlier years. You know, Republicans had not had control of the House of Representatives in 40 years. And in the lead up, renewing American civilization, you know, a series of tapes and recruitment that went on to get the perfect storm so that Republicans could finally take back that House. It was a monumental, historic achievement.
Well, thank you. I was going to say that one of the things I did was people that were listening may find interesting. Chris and I had a little spare time last night, and for some reason, we ended up pulling up Trump and Clinton at the Al Smith dinner in 2016. And it is an amazing speech that Trump gave that night. And it's something that the Biden people should look at because, you know, this is not going to be like hanging out with a group of folks who have no energy, no drive, and no courage. This is going to be like hanging out with, if Biden does get the nomination, he's going to be up against somebody who is quite prepared to stay on him and to tell the truth and to work to solve problems. And I think it'll be a fascinating campaign. For the life of me, I don't understand why any Democrat would be comfortable having Biden as their nominee, just because I think that it's so conceivable.
Well, privately, they're telling me they're not. I'm sure you're getting the same thing. Privately, they're saying, "Uh-oh, yeah, we're worried." They'll admit it. People that I do know that have some degree of intellectual honesty. Let me ask you this. We're now watching. First, we had Russia, never-ending investigation. They've done nothing for the American people for 3 years. Then it's Ukraine. To get there, it's a spectacular boatload of hypocrisy that they must take on, and that is you'll ignore quid pro quo Joe leveraging $1 billion so that his son can continue to make billions with zero experience, just like Hillary had the dirty Russian dossier, just like they ignored FISA abuse and spying on a candidate transition team and presidency. So my question is now, it seems like they want to weaponize and bludgeon Donald Trump with corona. The timeline, unfortunately for them, shows a president that did something that nobody else would ever do. And that is within 3 weeks of identifying that virus, he had a travel ban in effect and quarantines, which had not happened in this country for decades. Now all the money is being allocated. Does this work? Does this backfire too? Or are they just going to say, you know, Donald Trump created the virus in a lab?
Well, no, I think in the end it does not work for them, both because on the key issues, Trump has always been in favor of controlling the border. They've always been against controlling the border. Well, you now have an absolute case study of why you want to know who's coming in your country. And I think it just makes it that much harder for them to win the argument. Second, when the economy starts to recover, which I think it will do by early May, all of a sudden we're going to be on an upward swing once again. And the difference between a Trump economy and the left will be amazing. And finally, notice what's happening. For everybody who wants government-run health care and the government to take over everything, the government to destroy the pharmaceutical industry, it is the private sector which is rushing in with a series of steps both towards treatment and towards vaccines. And it's the strength of the American private sector which is actually putting us in a position where I think we're going to be able to whip this thing, certainly we'll be much better by summer in treating it, and by sometime early next year, we're going to have a vaccine that will, in fact, take care of it.
You know, amazing. So I don't see the success either. And, you know, It's another example that as people become more informed, you compare this in 2000.